Hello, it's just David here with my weekly message. I was thinking about, of course, I'm running 10 big questions, a drink and a pudding. Come along, Sunday evening, 7:30. Plenty of sort of information about it. I thought I might, from time to time, I'm not sure if I'm going to do it for all of the 10 questions, but perhaps use these videos to kind of, because it's something I'll be thinking about, give my sort of more personal answers to the questions raised, because I tried to sort of look at things in a fairly sort of neutral way. It's not designed to be a kind of, you know, this, you must think what Christians think course. It's a kind of exploration course in which obviously, as a church we'll put the Christian point of view, but say, well, there are other points of view, and try and enable, grown up people to come to their own minds about things using their own intelligence. But therefore, it's kind of, reasonable to say, well, in the end, what do I think? And the first question we're looking at is, does God exist? Which I suppose is a fairly kind of important one to start with. And we'll talk about sort of various things, but I thought I might just tell you my sort of personal views on this. First of all, I think one of the points that we'll raise is, we all assume what we need, we know what we mean by God, and that's a slightly dodgy assumption. I mean, roughly, in terms of the conception of God, we can assume that sort of Jews, Christians, and Muslims, because they're kind of related and sort of fairly dominant in sort of the West and sort of Near East, that we have the same idea of God, what's called the Judeo-Christian conception of God, and that's true. I mean, generally, those religions, much as they disagree about other else, their kind of basic conception of God has been common. But there are other different conceptions of God. I mean, so much so that the first Christians were called atheists, because actually people thought, well, you might believe in something, but it's not God. So first of all, we have to know what we mean by God. Is he involved in the world? Is he indeed part of the world? I mean, the Greek Olympian gods were kind of almost sort of part of the natural order. Now Christians don't believe that. We believe that God is what we call transcendent. But then we also believe he's immanent. So we believe he cares about the world and he's involved in it. And there's other conceptions of God where, frankly, it matters not whether God exists or not, because he's so kind of distant, he's so uninvolved, that it kind of makes no difference. It's a kind of dead question. So we need to think about, exactly what we mean by God. And then there's sort of the moral question, isn't there? What, I mean, somebody once said, Richard Dawkins, the famous sort of atheist, Richard Dawkins doesn't believe in exactly the same sort of God that I don't believe in. And there's much that's true in that. I mean, Dawkins tends to sort of put up a straw man of God. He says, the Christian God is the God who believes every word of the Bible is true, who believes the world was created in 7 days, who, believes that awful things ought to happen to whole nations because, Israel has to make room for itself. And of course, many Christians, many Jews, many Muslims don't believe in that sort of God either. I don't believe the world was created in 7 days. So, and as I say, he sets up a straw man, and in a way you can't argue with that, because I don't believe in that sort of God either. Or you don't believe in the sort of God, that ISIS believes in God, believes in a sort of awful, terrible God. I don't believe in that sort of God either. I suppose my kind of basic thing, where perhaps I'm a bit different from most people, is that I think, I don't know, a lot of people sort of say to me something like, intellectually I find it difficult. There's science and there's evolution, there's the modern world, there's all the kind of things that can be explained, and intellectually it's kind of stopped making sense to me. But nonetheless, I feel there's something there and I kind of want to believe there's something underpinning the moral order. Um, I kind of am slightly the opposite of that, and that's perhaps sometimes why I find it quite difficult to kind of relate to that. I mean, I'm a scientist by training. Intellectually, it makes sense to me, um, oddly, in a way. I've never had great intellectual doubts about the existence of God. I mean, obviously, things like evolution and the way modern science works has kind of meant that we've had to reframe. But because I've always kind of been brought up with both of them, as it were. It's not particularly been difficult to put them together. But I realise for a lot of people it is. It's actually the other bit I find difficult. I mean, other people will, talk about the, a feeling of the presence of God. I mean, to be honest with you, in that sense, I've not been a greatly sort of, I don't know what the word is, privileged person, spiritual person. I'm not somebody who, hears God talking to me, who knows God almost as a physical presence. I mean, I think I do. Obviously, I'm a Christian minister, so I pray. But I mean, a lot of the time, I think I pray and think and wonder, and I also, find I do, if I'm honest, want to question God and say, well, is he a good God? I mean, that's one of the other questions we tackle. I mean, I look at the world around us, and what shakes my faith isn't sort of the latest scientific development; it's the latest atrocity in the name of religion, or it's some terrible natural catastrophe. Now I know a lot of those can be explained away. I mean, where it's sort of a man-made genocide. Well, that's the response of the people doing it and their twisted view of God. In a sense, I understand you can't blame God for that. But but natural disasters and some awful things happen, and not just on like a global scale, but I mean, I think this is the trouble, isn't it? Once you're involved in sort of work I do, sort of pastoral life, you go around, you visit people, and you're often visiting people in quite dire straits. They've medically or psychologically, and if you do that all day, at the end of it, you'd have to be pretty inhuman not to come home and say, why God, why is this person in hospital in this bad state? Why has this person died? Why is this person suffering mental anguish that they don't seem to deserve? I say perhaps that's just because of the kind of work that I do. So, I mean, that sounds a little bit confessional. I mean, don't worry, I'm not sort of, I'm not sort of, in any way sort of answering a negative to God exists. I think he does, but I do think just my personal motivations for believing that, my reasons are perhaps not typical, and I say rather perhaps the opposite. I mean, people are mixtures, aren't they? People vary. But I would have to say, yeah, intellectually, I find it quite easy to believe in God. The times I doubt is the sort of the kind of the feeling bit of it, the sort of emotional side. I say particularly when I see some of the sort of the bad things, the suffering that happens in the world. That's what sort of tests my faith. So it'd be interesting to find out what other people think. Am I right? Is it for most people sort of the intellectual bit that's difficult and the emotional bit that's a bit easier, or actually are more people like me, or are there a whole other load of different reasons that people believe or don't believe in God? Be interesting to know. Anyway, there we are. Just some few thoughts on existence of God, and as I say, maybe return to some of these themes in the next few weeks. Thank you.